The garage door creaked open, letting in a blast of cold Massachusetts air that cut through my sweater and made me tighten my cardigan around my shoulders. I reached for the switch and clicked on the bare overhead bulb. It flickered once, then glowed weakly, casting pale light over the cot, the cardboard boxes, and the dusty outline of the snowblower we never used anymore. Before we dive into all of this, let us know in the comments where you're watching this video from. Connecting with viewers across the world is a huge source of inspiration for us. This was my room now. I sat on the edge of the fold-out cot, too narrow, too stiff, and glanced out the single-pane window. The house, the one Harold and I built from the ground up 40 years ago, stood just 50 feet away, glowing in the golden light of late autumn. Every window was lit. I could hear faint laughter drifting from the kitchen. Claire's voice, Nathan's deeper chuckle trailing after hers. They were hosting a dinner party. Again, I was not invited. "You're welcome to join, Mom," Claire had said earlier that afternoon, not meeting my eyes. "But Nathan thinks it might be awkward. You know, with his colleagues. It's just easier this way." What I knew was that Nathan Whitaker, my son-in-law of 5 years, thought I didn't fit the image he was trying to project. A self-made financial advisor with a pristine family life. No room in that picture for an old woman in wool socks who still called the bathroom a washroom. But what he didn't know, what no one really knew, was who I had been, and who I still was. Before Harold passed, we lived in this house as partners. He built it with his hands, and I ran the business with mine. Holloway Construction wasn't just a company, it was our life's work. Harold handled the beams and bricks. I handled the books, the contracts, the negotiations. We were a good team. Respected. Rooted. And when he died 5 years ago, I did what Harold asked of me in those final days. I took care of Claire. I gave her everything. She was our only child. Maybe that was part of the problem. We spoiled her. Private schools, European summers, a car at 16, and when she brought Nathan home during her senior year at Mount Holyoke, I smiled through my doubts. He was polished, charming in a rehearsed sort of way. Too clean, too smooth. "Comes from a good family," Harold had said. Claire could do worse. And so I bit my tongue. And then I bit it again. All the way through the engagement, the lavish wedding planned mostly by Nathan's mother, and the honeymoon in Italy that cost more than our first mortgage. Then came the suggestion. Casual at first. "Claire misses the house," Nathan said one evening over Sunday dinner. "She talks about raising kids where she grew up. It'd mean the world to her." I knew what he was doing. I wasn't blind, but Harold's voice echoed in my head. "Promise me you'll look after Claire. Give her what she needs." So I signed the house over. With one condition, I would stay in the guest suite off the main wing. It was a fair arrangement. Claire cried when I handed her the deed. I cried too. That was 11 months ago. Now I sleep in the garage. The transition was slow, almost imperceptible. The first time, Nathan moved my holiday china to a shelf I couldn't reach. Then Claire suggested I use the back door when guests were over, just so it's easier. Then came the renovations. The oak cabinetry Harold built with his own hands? Replaced. The reading nook Claire used as a girl? Gone. One day, I came back from the community center and found my things moved to the garage. "They'll only be here a few weeks," Claire had said about Nathan's parents. "We need the guest suite." That was 2 months ago. I tried to believe it was temporary. That Claire just didn't realize how cold the concrete floor got at night. That Nathan didn't hear my cough from the back of the property. But the truth settled like frost in my bones. They didn't want me inside the house anymore. I looked around the garage. There was a cot, a lamp, a small electric heater that hummed against the chill but did little else. My suitcase sat in the corner, unopened since I came back from visiting my sister in Maine. 50 feet from the house I built. From the cherrywood table Harold and I picked out on our 25th anniversary. From the garden where Claire once buried a time capsule with a note that read, "Dear future me, I hope you're kind to my mom." I don't know where that note ended up. Maybe Nathan threw it out during the last remodel. I picked up my phone and stared at the contact list. My thumb hovered over a name I hadn't called in years. Frank Delaney, Harold's old business partner. The only person besides me who knew the full scope of what we'd built, of what I still had. I pressed call. "Oh," he answered on the third ring. "Margaret Holloway. It's been too long." I took a deep breath, staring out at the house I once called home. "Frank," I said softly, "I think it's time for Plan B. If you're still watching, comment 1 so I know you're still with me." Frank Delaney showed up 2 days later, driving the same beat-up Navy Ford he'd had for decades. His gray hair had thinned since I last saw him, but the sharpness in his eyes was still there, the same eyes that once negotiated million-dollar land deals over a cup of diner, coffee, and a handshake. We met at Kelly's Diner on Main Street, where the waitress still called me honey and remembered how I liked my coffee. I slid into the corner booth just as Frank walked in, removing his flat cap and scanning the room like he always did, half out of habit, half out of instinct. He spotted me, gave that half grin I remembered, and walked over. "Still drinking that watered-down coffee, Maggie?" he said as he slid into the booth across from me. "It's not about the coffee," I replied, cupping the warm mug. "It's about being somewhere they know your name." Frank gave a slow nod, then leaned in, voice low. "You said Plan B. I assume that means things have gotten worse than you let on." I didn't respond immediately. I just reached into my purse, pulled out a legal envelope, and placed it on the table between us. He glanced at it, then back at me. "That what I think it is?" I nodded. "Harold's contingency file. The one we tucked away when we started Horizon Trust." Frank let out a soft whistle. "You still have it. I never stopped needing it." Inside that envelope were the original papers for Horizon Trust, an LLC. Harold and I quietly formed years before his diagnosis. On the surface, it looked like a harmless estate planning tool, but what it really held was our entire financial escape hatch: deeded properties, real estate investments, silent partnerships, and bank accounts in 3 states. Nathan and Claire didn't know about Horizon. That was the point. Frank took the envelope, flipping through the contents quickly but carefully, his thumb pausing on one particular document. "The cabin in Vermont's still listed under Horizon," he said. "You haven't moved anything?" "No," I said. "I thought I wouldn't need to. Thought I'd live out my years with my daughter, in the house we built." I paused, then added, "I was wrong." Frank set the envelope aside. "Tell me everything." So I did. I told him about the garage, about the temporary arrangement that had turned into a silent exile, about the cold, the cough I couldn't shake, about how I watched them host dinner parties while I ate microwave soup on a folding tray. And then I told him the thing I hadn't even admitted out loud yet. "I don't think Claire even sees me anymore. Not really. I'm just an inconvenience." Frank didn't speak for a long moment. Then he sat back and said, "What do you want to do, Maggie? Do you want the house back?" I shook my head. "It's not about the house. It's about the principle. I gave them everything, and they've made it clear that I'm no longer part of the picture." "Then you want leverage." "I want options." And he nodded slowly. "Well, you've got them. The question is, how hard are you willing to hit?" I looked him straight in the eye. "Hard enough to make sure no one ever puts me in a garage again." He smiled. That's the Maggie I remember. Over the next week, Frank stayed in town under the radar. He booked a room at the Maplewood Inn and visited a few old contacts, attorneys, bankers, even a real estate broker who owed us a favor or two from the Holloway construction days. Meanwhile, I went about my life as usual, or at least, as expected. I volunteered at the community center. I waved politely to neighbors. I smiled at Claire when we crossed paths in the driveway, and nodded when Nathan offered a hollow good morning on his way to his Tesla. I played the part, but behind the scenes, I was taking inventory. One afternoon, while Claire and Nathan were out some fundraising gala, I think I walked the perimeter of the main house. I still had a key to the basement, and Nathan hadn't thought to change the locks. I entered quietly and found the storage room exactly as we'd left it a decade ago: crates of seasonal decorations, Harold's old drafting table, and a fireproof box hidden behind a stack of file cabinets. The box held copies of older deeds, blueprints, and a flash drive labeled insurance. I tucked it into my coat pocket. Back in the garage that night, I plugged the drive into my old laptop and found a folder titled WHTK Audit. Inside, spreadsheets, correspondence, and flagged transactions going back 3 years. Harold had been tracking Nathan before he died. It hit me like a brick. All that time I thought Harold was slowing down, fading away. But he'd been quietly gathering evidence, watching Nathan, preparing in case something ever happened to me or Claire. My throat tightened. I whispered to the dark garage, "You knew. You saw it coming. And somehow, you still trusted me to handle it." I wasn't sure I was worthy of that faith, but I was going to try. The following Friday, I met Frank again, this time at the Red Lantern, a local tavern where the music was loud enough to mask conversation. He slid into the booth, holding a different envelope this time. "You're not going to like this," he said. I took it and opened it. Inside were records from Nathan's firm public filings, licensure data, and a few screenshots taken by one of Frank's contacts. "Clients are showing consistent 10% returns," Frank said. "Even when the market's tanking." I frowned. "That's not just suspicious. That's criminal." "Not yet, but we're close. A few more documents, a couple of statements from clients, and we'll have enough to bring it to a financial crimes investigator." I exhaled slowly. "And Claire?" Frank looked at me with something like pity. "Still under his spell?" I nodded. "But she's starting to question things, especially after the last remodel." He tore out the Nook Harold built for her, the one with the window seat and the carved initials. Frank winced. "That man's got no soul." "He's got charm. And money. And just enough manipulation to make her think she's the problem." Frank leaned forward. "So here's what we do. We keep gathering. And when the time's right, you make your move. Not a fight, a reckoning. You walk in, not as a mother-in-law, not as a burden, but as the woman who still owns the future." I smiled. Not the soft smile I used when baking pies or watching the sunset from the porch. This was the kind of smile I hadn't worn in years. The kind that meant business. If you're still watching, comment one so I know you're still with me. The office was smaller than I expected, just 2 rooms above a bakery on East Maple Street, but the woman behind the desk carried herself like she'd prosecuted mob bosses from New York to Chicago. Her name was Alicia Monroe, and Frank had said she was the best shot we had. Technically, she wasn't FBI yet. She was a senior investigator for the state's Financial Compliance Bureau, but she'd spent years cooperating with federal task forces. "You must be Margaret," she said, standing to greet me. "Frank said you don't waste time." "I don't have the years left to waste," I replied. Her handshake was firm, professional. No fuss. I liked her already. I sat across from her and slid the folder across the desk old files. Ledgers Harold had flagged, copies of Nathan's firm's glossy brochures, and the statements from Elaine Prescott and 2 others Frank had quietly contacted. Alicia flipped through the first few pages, eyebrows lifting slightly as she scanned numbers. She didn't say much, just nodded once, then again, and again. After a long pause, she looked up. "Where did you get this?" "My late husband collected most of it," I said. "He had a nose for things that smelled off." "He was right," she murmured. "What Nathan Whitaker is doing may not be straight-up Ponzi, but it's close. Inflated returns, vague fund structures, and no third-party audit trail. That's textbook setup." I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. "So I'm not crazy." "No, ma'am. You're dangerous in the right way." Alicia closed the folder gently. "We'll begin quietly. My team will look deeper into his filings, talk to a few clients posing as prospective investors. You'll need to keep your distance. Act normal." "I've been doing that for months," I said. "Then keep doing it." She gave me a long, measuring look. "But if he finds out you're behind this, he'll come after you. Maybe not with fists, but reputation, intimidation, leverage. These types don't go down quietly." End of chapter. I met her eyes without blinking. Neither do I. Back at the garage that night, the heater sputtered twice before warming up. I wrapped myself in the quilt Irene had brought by last week and settled into the cot, phone in hand. Claire hadn't said much since I gave her the violin. But I'd seen it, how her shoulders softened when she held it, how her fingers hovered over the strings like they still remembered. She was still in there, beneath all the polish and fear. But Nathan had begun circling. That morning, I caught him glancing at my laptop when I left it on the kitchen counter during laundry. The day before, he made a joke about updating the house deed again, just for estate planning. He was nervous. And a nervous man in power was never harmless. The next day, he confirmed it. I came back from the grocery store and found a folded note on my cot. It was typed, unsigned. Just a single sentence. You may want to remember who's under the roof and who's just visiting. I read it 3 times. Then I smiled. It meant he knew I was moving pieces. He didn't know what or how much, but the act of watching me meant he'd already started losing control. Still, I needed to move carefully now. One wrong step, and Nathan might corner Claire emotionally, or worse, legally. He had access to her finances, her email, her trust. I texted Frank. He's watching. Proceed with caution. His reply came within a minute. Understood. We move quietly now. Alicia will handle contact. You stay calm. I stayed calm. But inside me, something had shifted. It wasn't anger. I'd passed through that months ago. It was something colder, more exact. The thing that rises when you've been wounded long enough to stop flinching. Resolve. That Sunday, Claire came out to the garage with a basket of clean towels. I did some digging, she said. Found a folder on Nathan's cloud account. I wasn't supposed to see it, but she looked down. He's been drawing money from my trust. Small amounts, but regular, and always marked as administrative maintenance. I stayed silent. I let her hear her own words. I feel stupid, she said. Like I wanted to believe the story so badly, I never questioned the storyteller. That's not stupidity, I said gently. That's loyalty. It just got pointed in the wrong direction. Oh, Claire sat down beside me. What do I do now? You listen, I said. You pay attention, and when the time comes, you stand. She nodded slowly. And what will you do? I gave a small, tired smile. Exactly what he thinks I won't. The first thing I noticed was the doormat. It used to say, Welcome. A simple brown square with frayed corners and a crack through the W. Harold hated replacing things that still worked. But now, in its place, lay a sleek, custom mat with a scripted The Whitakers etched in silver thread. My name was gone. Not just from the mat, but, I suspected, from the narrative Nathan had been carefully crafting since the day he married Claire. He'd built a world where I was a footnote, maybe even a burden. But this house knew better. Every creaking stair, every hand-picked curtain, every floorboard Harold laid himself, all of it remembered me. That Sunday morning, I stood on the brick pathway leading to the front porch, not with a basket of muffins or folded towels, but with a binder in hand. Claire had agreed to meet. Not in secret, not whispered over garden shears or violin strings, but here, in the house, at the kitchen table where I used to serve her cocoa on snow days. When she opened the door, she looked nervous. Nathan's out, she said quickly. Board meeting. He won't be back till dinner. Entry. I stepped inside, letting the scent of lemon polish and faint lavender fill my senses. It smelled like order, like control, too clean. She poured coffee as I opened the binder between us. These are notarized copies, I said, of the trust Harold and I created before he passed. The one Nathan doesn't know about. Claire's eyes widened. Horizon Trust? I nodded. It owns everything Nathan thinks he's inherited, including this house. She blinked. But wait. The deed. You signed. I signed the visible portion, I said. But the deed is layered. Legal protection. Harold was smarter than most men I've met, and he saw further than we gave him credit for. Claire leaned back, processing. What do you want me to do with this? She finally asked. Read it. Know it. And then decide, do you want to reclaim your life or let him keep scripting it? That afternoon, I stayed in the garage, but left the door ajar. Deliberate choice. Nathan pulled into the driveway around 4:30, earlier than expected. His Tesla glided silently to a stop, and he stepped out in a tailored jacket and that rehearsed smile he wore like armor. He noticed the garage door first, then me, sitting calmly with a cup of tea. Everything all right? He asked, casual as ever. I nodded. Just enjoying the breeze. It's nice to feel part of the house again. He tilted his head. I hope there's no misunderstanding about the arrangements. Claire and I have a lot going on. It's best when boundaries are clear. Boundaries can be good, I agreed, as long as they go both ways. His eyes flicked just a twitch. Then he smiled. You've always had a strong personality, Margaret. That's what I admire about you. I said, sipping. You remind me of a man I once knew in church council. Talked smooth, dressed sharp, took up 2 seats at every table, one for himself and one for his ego. He laughed, unsure whether I was joking. I can take a compliment. I smiled politely. Oh, that wasn't one. His smile faded. For the first time, he realized something had changed. The next morning, Claire didn't come to the garage. Instead, she left an envelope on my cot. Inside were printouts from Nathan's shared cloud documents he never meant her to see. One, in particular, chilled me. It was a drafted letter addressed to a private equity firm. In it, Nathan claimed sole ownership of the Fairhaven house and referenced his intent to borrow against its equity to fund a growth opportunity. He was planning to gut the house, sell pieces of it, turn my memories into leverage. But now, he'd be too late. That evening, I stepped back into the kitchen like I belonged because I did. Claire was already there, staring at the stove, the binder from the day before now closed but within reach. I think I've been sleepwalking, she whispered. Through the last 5 years, through my marriage, through my own spine. You've woken up, I said. That's all that matters. She turned to me, eyes brimming. What if he fights? What if he twists this? He will, I said simply. But now we have the truth. And names, and dates, and witnesses, and me. She laughed, shaky, but real. You've been planning this a long time, haven't you? I shook my head. No, Claire. I just stopped being afraid. Claire reached out and took my hand. We end this together, she said. For your father, I replied. And for every woman who's ever been pushed aside in her own home. If you're still watching, comment once so I know you're still with me. It's funny how silence changes. There's the silence that comes from being ignored, the kind I'd grown used to in that garage. The kind that tells you you've become background noise in your own life. Then there's the other kind, the silence between allies. Claire and I sat at the kitchen table with mugs of chamomile and a legal pad between us. No shouting, no tears. Just the kind of quiet you get when 2 people are done pretending and finally ready to fix something broken. I found 3 more withdrawals, she said, tapping the page. All labeled the same investment overhead. He's been using my trust as a revolving door. I nodded. And this house? He tried to reassign it again. The letter never went through, but he's trying to show sole ownership to outside lenders. She swallowed hard. And legally he can't do that? Not with the Horizon Trust in place. And not with the original deed Harold filed before he passed. Claire looked at me with something I hadn't seen in years' respect. Not just as her mother, but as a woman who hadn't folded under pressure. A woman who had quietly held the line. We need to move fast, she said. If he gets wind of this, he'll either disappear with what's left or... She didn't finish. She didn't have to. He already suspects, I said. He left me a warning. No signature, of course, just enough to say he's watching. Claire's shoulders tensed. He's never laid a hand on me, but now I wonder what he's capable of when the image starts cracking. He thrives on the illusion of control, I replied. Take that away, and the mask falls. Claire stared into her tea. I married someone who doesn't even see people, just assets. And you're finally seeing yourself, I said gently. She nodded, then opened her laptop. What are you doing? I asked. Changing my passwords, locking him out of my accounts, and calling the lawyer who handled the trust for the Violin Foundation. She always liked you better than Nathan anyway. I smiled. She had good instincts. Later that evening, Nathan returned home early. He walked in without a word, hanging his coat in that too precise way of his, the kind of man who straightens his shoes even in a storm. I watched from the edge of the hallway as he passed the kitchen, then paused just slightly when he saw the open laptop and scattered papers on the table. Claire met his gaze like she was made of steel. Everything all right? He asked, smooth as butter. Fine, she said. Just working through some financial housekeeping. Without me? You've been busy. Oh? He glanced at me, still seated quietly with my tea. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Nice to see you inside the house again, Margaret. I live here, I said simply. He chuckled. Well, that's something we might need to revisit, given the circumstances. Claire stood. No, she said. We won't. He looked at her like she'd just spoken in a foreign language. What's that supposed to mean? It means, she said evenly, that I've reviewed the original Horizon Trust documents. I know about the withdrawals. I know what you tried to do with the equity. And I know the house isn't yours to borrow against. The air thinned. His face hardened, jaw tightening. That trust is old. It won't hold up. Claire stepped closer. You'd be surprised how well my father documented things. He always did like insurance. He scoffed. You don't understand the business. No, she said. But Mom does. And she never stopped watching. That was the moment. The exact second Nathan realized his world was no longer fully in his control. I saw it in the way his shoulder dropped just a little. The calculation in his eyes. Not panits. Stratege. Let's not do anything rash, he said, suddenly soft again. There are legal implications. There always are, I said. Especially when people try to steal what was never theirs. He turned to me sharply. You're enjoying this, aren't you? I stood, meeting him eye to eye. No, I said, but I'm done pretending I'm not here. And I left the room. Because sometimes, the most powerful move is simply refusing to disappear. The email arrived just after dawn. Claire found it first flagged urgent, sent from Nathan's private account, not his firm's. Plays, he called me to the main house before breakfast, her face pale and tight. He sent this to my sister in Ohio, to Uncle Ray, even to my old piano teacher, for heaven's sake. I took the tablet from her hands and read. It pains me to share this, but I feel compelled to protect those who might be manipulated. Margaret has been experiencing signs of mental confusion, erratic behavior, paranoia, and delusions about financial conspiracies. Claire and I are trying to get her the support she needs, but it's a difficult road. I set the tablet down slowly, fingers curling into my lap. He hadn't just drawn a line in the sand. He'd fired the first public shot. Claire looked like she might cry. Mom, this is character assassination. I shook my head. It's an old trick. Discredit the witness before the trial. He's turning people against you. I've lived long enough to know the ones worth keeping won't be turned. She blinked, but said nothing. I could tell she wasn't just worried for me. She was afraid of what this meant for her. By mid-morning, the phone calls started. Aunt Linda, cautious and confused. Claire said your mom's okay, right? A message from the neighbor across the street. Tell Margaret I'm praying for her mind. Age is cruel, isn't it? Even Irene texted. Mags? What's going on? You okay? Saw a weird post on Nextdoor. Nextdoor. Of course. Nathan was modern in the most dangerous ways. He didn't need to scream. He just needed to cast enough doubt that people would begin whispering behind closed doors. I sat on the garage cot and opened my notebook. The yellow legal pad, the one I'd started weeks ago now, held every lie he'd ever tried to plant. Page after page of truths. But it was time to stop playing defense. I met Frank at the corner cafe just after lunch. I wore sunglasses and a hat more for humor than concealment, and slid into the booth with my usual decaf and dry toast. He's going loud, I said. Frank looked grim. Saw it, Alicia called. She says hold the line. Let the documents speak. I can't just let people think I've lost my mind. Those who matter won't. The rest? He shrugged. Let them talk. We're past image now. I tapped the table once. Then, it's time. Frank nodded. You want me to prep the letter? No, I said. I'll write it. In my hand. On my terms. What about Claire? I smiled faintly. She's stronger than he thinks. That night, Nathan made his next move. He invited Claire to dinner, just the two of them. Claimed it was to reset. She told me first. He said he wants to talk things through. Clear the air. I looked at her. He wants to isolate you. I know, she said, but I want to hear what he thinks I believe. Let him underestimate me. I watched her walk out the door, head high. Her heels clicked like punctuation on a sentence I hadn't dared write yet. My daughter was not asleep anymore. She came back late. I was waiting on the porch. Well? I asked. Claire dropped her purse on the step and let out a long, bitter laugh. He thinks I'm broken. Thinks I'll come crawling back as long as he calls me smart and hands me a glass of wine. Oh? What did he say? That you're sick. That I'm tired. That none of this has to become messy if we just move you somewhere with care. My stomach turned. He wants me committed. Or discredited. Either works for him. She knelt beside me. Mom, she said. He doesn't know you gave me power of attorney 2 months ago. Doesn't know you filed it through a separate lawyer. Doesn't know the trust has already been reviewed by the compliance board. I reached over and took her hand. You've been listening, I whispered. She nodded. Every word. At midnight, I took out a fresh sheet of paper. The letter was short. Only 3 paragraphs. But it said everything it needed to. That I was of sound mind. That my actions were deliberate. That I had full documentation, legal counsel, and intent to press charges if threatened again. At the bottom, I signed in blue ink, Margaret Elaine Hollis. Because names matter. And I wasn't afraid of mine anymore. I mailed the letter myself. No email, no text. No lawyer delivering it for me. I took a walk just after sunrise. The streets still damp from last night's rain. And dropped the envelope into the blue mailbox at the end of Maple Lane, the one Harold and I used to visit on our morning walks, back when letters were how people fought clean. It was addressed to Nathan. 3 paragraphs. Firm and precise. No emotion. No plea for understanding. Just facts, boundaries, and a warning. If he moved $1 more without authorization, if he tampered with trust documents or manipulated Claire again, I would turn over the file to Alicia Monroe and press forward with formal charges. There would be no second warning. That evening, the silence returned, not peaceful this time, but taut like a stretched violin string. Claire sat beside me on the porch, clutching her mug like a lifeline. Do you think he'll fight back? She asked. I hope so, I said, because it means he's afraid. She looked at me, startled. Fear makes people sloppy, I added. And we're almost there. He didn't respond the next day. Nor the one after. For 72 hours there was nothing. No email. No confrontation. Just polite avoidance and the cold professionalism of a man calculating his next move. Then came Friday. Claire had gone into town to meet with her lawyer. I was in the garage folding laundry when I heard a soft knock on the side door. I opened it. Nathan stood there, dress-down jeans, t-shirt, no blazer. His eyes were calm, but too calm. I figured we should talk, he said. I nodded and stepped aside. He didn't sit, just paced the small space like a man measuring a cell. I read your letter, he said finally. Very dramatic. It wasn't written for drama, I replied. It was written for clarity. He smiled without warmth. You've always had a flair for righteousness. No, I said. I've had a talent for endurance. There's a difference. He turned toward me, hands in pockets. Do you really think you'll win, Margaret? In the court of public opinion? Against a clean-cut financial advisor who pays his taxes and supports local charities? I don't need public opinion, I said. I need the truth. And paperwork. His smile faltered for half a second. Just enough. You're making things harder than they need to be, he said. And you've mistaken silence for weakness. He took a slow breath, then pulled something from his back pocket, a manila envelope, sealed. He held it out. I wasn't going to use this, he said, voice low. But you've left me no choice. I took it with steady hands and opened it. Inside, a printed draft of a legal motion, one that challenged my mental competency, dated 2 weeks prior. I had this prepared in case things got complicated, he said. If you press forward, I file this. The process alone will drag you through courts for months. It'll drain your savings, embarrass Claire, put you on defense. I looked down at the motion, then up at him, and I smiled. Thank you, I said softly. He blinked. What? For confirming everything, I said. I'll have this copied and added to our file. It proves you had intent to discredit me before I took any action. It shows premeditation. His face went blank. You tricked me? I gave you room to make your own choices, I said. And you chose intimidation. He took a step back, the manila envelope still in my hand. You'll regret this, he said. Not a threat, just a hope. No, I replied. But you might. He left without another word. I closed the door, and for the first time since Harold passed, I exhaled without fear. Claire returned that evening. I handed her the envelope. She read the motion once, then set it down. I'm sorry, she whispered, that I ever let him speak for us. You were surviving, I said. Now you're choosing. She looked at me. And what do we do next? I leaned back in the chair. We wait, I said. Because now he's the one playing catch-up. That night, it rained again. But this time, it didn't sound like a storm. It sounded like washing, like something being cleaned, like the beginning of something honest. If you're still watching, comment one so I know you're still with me. It was a Wednesday. Ordinary, if you looked at the calendar. But nothing about that morning felt ordinary. Claire and I stood just outside the county courthouse, the wind tugging at the sleeves of our coats. She carried the folder. I carried nothing, just my name, my resolve, and the years of silence I was finally done with. Alicia met us at the top of the steps. She didn't offer small talk, just a firm nod and a glance at the documents. They're ready, she said. The formal complaint, supporting evidence, timeline of withdrawals, and your notarized statement. Claire inhaled sharply. Once this is filed, there's no undoing it. No, I said. But there's finally accountability. We walked in together, 3 women, 3 generations worth of knowing what it meant to be dismissed and underestimated, and handed the file over to the clerk at window 3. It made no sound. No bang. No gavel. Just the soft thump of paper meeting desk. But sometimes justice begins that quietly. By Friday, word had started spreading. Alicia's office didn't name Nathan directly. Not yet. But local advisors and clients connected dots quickly. Elaine Prescott called me first, voice trembling. I always wondered if I'd imagined it, she said. The fees, the confusion, the way Nathan talked over me. But now that I know I wasn't alone. You never were, I said gently. Within 2 days, 5 more people reached out. Some from town, one from out of state, all older. All told the same story, assurances, jargon, and a nagging feeling they'd been swindled in slow motion. And every one of them had kept quiet. Until now. Nathan, on the other hand, didn't stay quiet. He moved fast, just not smart. On Sunday morning, Claire opened the front door to find a real estate appraiser standing on the lawn. Here to assess value, he said. Mr. Whitaker's request. Claire didn't blink. This home is held in protected trust, she said, and any attempts to leverage it without consent will be met with a cease and desist. The man nodded once, clipped and quick, and left. By Monday, Nathan's name had disappeared from the community center's donation board. The bank where he kept his business account requested a meeting. His own secretary, Maria, who'd worked with him for 6 years, put in notice. She left a post-it on his desk. I believed you until I saw how fast you tried to bury her. Good luck. He was still trying to stay composed. He wore the same suits, still smiled in the mirror. But cracks had begun to show. And the worst part for him? No one was yelling. They were just walking away. Claire found him in his office that night, sitting in the dark. I didn't think it'd matter, he said. 1 woman in a garage. Who would listen? She didn't respond. Just stood there. You really think she's some kind of hero? He scoffed. No, Claire said. I think she's tired of surviving quietly. He turned to her. And you're just fine with throwing everything away? The life I built? You didn't build it, she said softly. You borrowed it from people who trusted you. That night, I lit a candle. Not for ceremony. Not for Harold. For clarity. Because after years of living small, after letting other people write the story, I had finally picked up the pen. And there was still more to write. Judge-approved preliminary motion, she said. We have permission to begin formal interviews with prior clients. I closed my eyes and exhaled. Also, she added. The firm Nathan's been courting for a partnership? They've backed out. Quietly. Of course they have, I said. Even sharks don't swim near sinking ships. She laughed. That's poetic. Poetry's just truth with a rhythm. Before we hung up, she said one more thing. You know, Margaret, I've handled a lot of cases, but very few where someone doesn't want revenge. Just restoration. I didn't want to ruin him, I said. I just didn't want him to erase me. Silence. Then, well, you've done more than hold your place. You've made space for others to stand. That night, Claire and I had dinner together in the real dining room candles lit. Chicken casserole in the old blue dish Harold had always liked. As she cleared the plates, she looked at me. What comes next? I folded the linen napkin and smiled. Whatever we choose. Because this story no longer belonged to him. 3 days after the summons was served, I woke to a voice message from Alicia. Just wanted to let you know, she said. We've served Mr. Whitaker formally. He didn't say much, just stared at the envelope like he didn't know what it meant. I pictured him standing in that glossy office of his, marble desk behind him, ego shrinking by the second. I didn't feel joy, but I did feel finished. Claire made blueberry pancakes that morning. She never used to cook, but now she was reclaiming things, recipes, routines, herself. We ate quietly on the front porch while the early fall breeze rustled the hydrangeas. The garage door was open, but I hadn't slept there in over a week. No one had said anything. We just stopped pretending I was a guest. That afternoon, the call came from Jonah. He was a program director at the senior center downtown, not a flashy place, just rows of folding chairs, a dusty upright piano, and old photo boards on the walls. I heard about what happened, he said. From Maria, actually. She used to volunteer here. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. She's a good woman. She told me a little about what you uncovered, and what you endured. And I thought, his voice hesitated, would you be open to speaking at our Thursday gathering? He blinked. Me? We have a group, mostly women, who've all had experiences with financial betrayal. Kids, spouses, even pastors. They meet once a week. I think hearing from someone who fought back might mean something. I sat with the request. Not because I didn't want to help, but because, for so long, I'd only ever shared my story with walls and paper. Then I said, yes, I'll come. Oh, Thursday came with crisp air and a soft ache in my knees. A reminder that I was, in fact, still human. Claire drove me, but I asked her to wait outside. This one's mine, I told her. I need to stand up by myself. She smiled. You've been doing that for months. The community center smelled like old books and lemon polish. Chairs were set up in a half circle. There were maybe 20 people in the room, mostly women in their 60s and 70s. A few men with polite nods and tucked-in shirts. Jonah gave a small wave and guided me to the front. We don't do microphones, he whispered. Just stories. That suited me just fine. I stood, smoothed the front of my sweater, and began. My name is Margaret Hollis, and I used to think that being quiet was the same as being respectful, that staying out of the way meant I was doing the right thing. And heads nodded. But then my daughter married a man who smiled like a hero and stole like a ghost. And I let it happen, because I didn't want to cause trouble. A few gasps. One woman folded her arms tightly, like holding herself together. And then one day, I realized, my trouble was already here. It was just wearing a nice watch. A low chuckle. I told them about the trust, the garage, the ledger Harold left behind, the fake letter Nathan drafted about my mind. I told them about choosing to stop surviving and start reclaiming. When I finished, the room was quiet, but not empty. It was full of eyes meeting mine, of silence no longer burdened by shame. Then a woman stood, white hair in a bun, eyes like mine. My son forged my name on a refinancing document last year, she said. I didn't think anyone would believe me, but maybe now I'll try. Another woman added, my pastor convinced me to donate half my savings to his retreat fund. I haven't told anyone until now. And then another, and another. By the time I sat down, the circle wasn't silent anymore. It was brave. Back in the car, Claire took my hand. How was it? she asked. I looked out the window, where the last golden leaves of autumn drifted down like soft punctuation. It was the first time I spoke, and didn't shrink afterward. She squeezed my hand. You're doing more than speaking now. You're changing things. I smiled. No, Claire. I'm reminding people of what they already knew, that being quiet doesn't mean being invisible, and that being older doesn't mean you're done fighting. That night, I lit a candle again. Not for anger, not for revenge, but for every voice that had once been drowned out, now rising like a chorus. And in that small glow, I whispered, we're still here. It started with the clients. Not in waves, not at first, but like a steady dripping faucet that refuses to stop. One canceled their investment plan. Another requested a full audit. Then a longtime client, someone Nathan used to boast about over dinner, froze all assets and requested representation. The firm where Nathan had built his name started whispering. The boardroom no longer laughed at his jokes. The receptionist avoided eye contact. No one said anything directly, they didn't have to. Reputation is built on trust, and trust, that evaporates quietly, like morning dew, one lie at a time. Meanwhile, at home, Claire and I were preparing, not in anger, not with vengeance, but like women who had finally found solid ground beneath their feet and knew how precious that footing was. Claire laid out folders on the dining table, one marked Assets, another Testimony, and a third with yellow sticky notes labeled Dad's Originals. Judge wants everything clearly organized for pre-hearing review, she said. If it's clean, it sends a message. If it's messy, it gives him room to twist. I sipped tea beside her. You know, I said, you would have made a wonderful attorney. She chuckled. Too many ethics for politics. Too much stubbornness for law. No, I said, smiling. Just enough of both. That evening, a registered envelope arrived. Claire opened it, read it twice, then handed it to me with raised eyebrows. It was from Nathan's new attorney, not the slick-talking one he'd used before. This one had a name that sounded like she worked out of a strip mall. The letter was formal, desperate in its civility. Our client requests a non-public mediation to resolve matters without further reputational damage to all parties involved. I folded the letter once, then twice. They're flinching, I said, trying to make it look like they're being reasonable. Claire didn't answer right away, just stared out the window. Do we take it? No, I said. Not yet. He didn't offer fairness when we were quiet. He only wants mercy now that we have volume. She nodded, then said, I dreamed about Dad last night. Oh? He was in the garden, pruning the rose bushes, said, tell your mother she was always right. I smiled. Must have been a dream. He never said that when he was alive. Exactly why it felt so real, she laughed. The morning of the hearing, I wore the same coat I wore the day I met Harold's parents, wool, navy, with a hidden pin stitched under the lapel. Claire wore a gray blazer and held my hand in the hallway like she had when she was 5 and afraid of the dark. Alicia met us at the courthouse steps. You ready? She asked. As I'll ever be, I said. The courtroom was small, not like on television, just a few rows of benches, a worn seal above the judge's desk, and the low murmur of shuffled papers. Nathan sat at the other table, 2 seats from his lawyer. He didn't look up, but I watched him, not in hatred, not in triumph, just observation. The way a teacher watches a student who stopped showing up to class and now blames the test. When the judge entered, everyone stood, then sat. Introductions were made. Then the judge said something I'll never forget. This isn't a case about paperwork. This is a case about clarity, about who knew what, when, and whether harm was intended. He turned to our side first. Alicia spoke calmly. Claire presented the ledger. I confirmed my identity and intent. Then the judge turned to Nathan. His lawyer stumbled through prepared lines. Nathan tried to smile, but it landed wrong, too tight, too late. When asked why he filed a draft motion to declare me mentally unfit, he hesitated, said, I was concerned about her well-being. The judge raised an eyebrow. Yet you took no medical action, only legal, curious. Silence, thick enough to feel in your bones. Afterward, we stood in the hallway. The hearing was over for now. The judge would take it under review. Alicia said, "I think we did well. He didn't deny the ledger. That's key." Claire rubbed her forehead. "Why don't I feel relieved?" "Because we're still carrying the past," I said. "But we're no longer dragging it behind us. That's progress." That night, back at the house, Claire made pasta. The kind with too much garlic and not enough finesse. It was perfect. I sat on the porch afterward, alone for a moment, watching the wind carry leaves across the lawn. Nathan's world was shrinking, but ours was expanding. And the difference, I realized, wasn't just injustice. It was in choosing to live forward, not just fight back. The ruling came in a plain white envelope. Claire opened it at the kitchen table while I folded laundry. No big moment, no confetti, just a rustle of paper and a quiet gasp. "He ruled in our favor," she said. I looked up. "All counts?" She nodded. "Every single one." He acknowledged the forged documents, the unauthorized withdrawals, and the attempt to discredit you as predatory and intentional. I sat down. Not because I was overwhelmed, but because I didn't need to stand in defense anymore. Claire slid the letter to me. I scanned it slowly, absorbing each paragraph like a long-awaited rain after a long drought. At the end, in the judge's own words, "The court recognizes Margaret Hollis as full and competent owner of all disputed assets and acknowledges her actions as lawful, appropriate, and protected under existing trust law." Protected. It was such a strange word to see applied to me. Nathan didn't show up to hear the decision. His lawyer did. She delivered her own letter, a notice of withdrawal. I wasn't surprised. His world had always relied on people doing his talking for him. For the first time in years, I felt the floor beneath me as mine again. But I didn't feel triumphant, just steady. And that night, after Claire went to bed, I stayed up with a pen and a single sheet of stationery. The next morning, I asked Claire to drive me to the courthouse. "Not for anything formal. I just need to leave something," I said. She didn't ask what. She just handed me my coat and the keys. When we arrived, I walked in alone past the security desk, through the old hall with its dusty portraits, and into courtroom 2B. It was empty, silent, still. I walked to the front row and placed my envelope on the wooden bench where Nathan used to sit. Inside was a letter, handwritten, just a few lines. "I never wanted to destroy you, Nathan. I wanted you to stop destroying others. But somewhere in the wreckage of what you built, I hope you still find a mirror. And if you do look hard, not for forgiveness, for truth." I didn't sign it, because he knew exactly who it came from. Later that afternoon, Claire and I sat on the porch with peach iced tea and our feet up on the railing. She said, "You could have sued for damages, you know." "I know. You could have made sure he never worked in finance again." "I know." She looked at me, puzzled. "So why didn't you?" I took a slow sip. "Because what he fears most isn't poverty," I said. "It's being irrelevant, forgotten." She raised an eyebrow. "And you think that's enough?" "No," I replied. "But it's not my job to teach him anymore. He's already been handed the final lesson. What he does with it, that's on him." The next day, Jonah from the senior center called. "We're doing a follow-up session," he said. "You wouldn't believe how many people have come forward since your talk." I smiled. "I can believe it. We're thinking of starting a financial safety circle, weekly check-ins, shared knowledge, that kind of thing. Would you want to be a founding mentor?" I laughed. "At my age?" "Exactly at your age." I agreed, of course. Not because I was looking to be anyone's leader, but because if even one person could avoid the kind of trap I fell into, it would be worth every folded page in that ledger. A week later, Claire framed the judge's letter and hung it in the hallway. Right above it, she placed something else, the original Horizon Trust certificate, signed by Harold in his looping, steady hand. "You think Dad would be proud?" she asked one night. I looked at the wall, the papers, the home that was finally ours again. "I think he'd be surprised it took me this long." That evening, as the sun dipped behind the magnolia tree in the front yard, I lit a candle on the windowsill. Not for the fight, not for the victory, but for the moment after the part no one talks about. The part where you start breathing freely again. The part where you stop needing to prove anything. The part where you simply get to be whole. The letter came on official stationery. Embossed, even. Gold seal, in the corner. Claire brought it in with the rest of the mail and raised her eyebrows as she handed it to me. From the Office of Financial Oversight. Sounds important. I sat down at the table, unfolded it carefully, and read each line twice. They were inviting me to speak. Not at a courthouse. Not at a senior center. But at the State Advisory Panel on Financial Ethics and Elder Safeguarding. Claire read over my shoulder. Her mouth opened, then closed. "Mom," she said finally, "they want you to give the keynote." I looked at her. "I'm not a keynote kind of woman," she grinned. "Apparently you are now." The event was held in Raleigh in a ballroom with too much velvet and not enough sincerity. But the people in the room were real. Regulators, attorneys, nonprofit leaders, even a few financial advisors with furrowed brows and tight ties. I wore the same navy coat I had worn to court, but with a new scarf Claire bought me from a local artisan shop. Said it made me look assertively honest. The organizer met me at the door, beaming like I was royalty. "We've followed your case closely, Miss Hollis," she said. "You've given a lot of people courage." "I didn't mean to," I said. She smiled. That's usually how the best leaders start. I stepped onto the stage with my notes folded in my palm, not because I needed them, but because I liked the feeling of something solid in my hand. And I spoke. About the ledger Harold left me. About the moment I chose to stand up in my own garage. About the silence that almost swallowed me. And the small act of lighting a candle on the windowsill instead of losing hope. But more than that, I said, looking out over the crowd. This is about power. Not the flashy kind. Not the kind with stock options and leather chairs. I'm talking about the quiet kind. The power to say, that's not okay. The power to say, I matter. The power to protect someone else before they fall. I didn't expect applause, but when I stepped off the stage, I got it anyway. Back home, life returned to its gentle rhythm. The porch creaked in familiar places. The hydrangeas turned brown at the edges. And Claire had started something new. It began with an envelope of her own acceptance into a certification program for elder advocacy. "I want to do more than just recover," she told me one evening. "I want to prevent." I nodded. "That's how you heal, by planting something better where the rot once grew." She left every Tuesday and Thursday for night classes. I packed her sandwiches like I used to when she was in school, only now they came with sticky notes that read, "You are more capable than you know. Trust your gut. It's earned its stripes." I made oatmeal cookies. Don't forget to grab one. We didn't talk much about Nathan anymore. Not because we forgot, but because we were done letting him take up space in rooms he never earned. One evening in late November, Claire came home with red cheeks and an envelope in her hand. "I got it," she said. "Got what?" "My internship. With the Elder Fraud Resource Center. It starts in January, and they've offered to sponsor my continued certification." I stood and hugged her tight. "You're walking through the door," I whispered. "What door?" "The one I pried open," I said. "You're walking through it, and holding it for others." She smiled into my shoulder. "You held it for me first." That night, we lit 2 candles. One for Harold. One for all the women who don't even know yet that they're allowed to speak. And in the hush of the house, I sat with the silence and thought, this is what legacy really means. Not land, not money, but memory, and motion, and meaning, carried forward gently by hands that finally feel steady. The woman's name was Joyce, late 60s, neatly dressed, though her coat was too thin for December. She sat across from Claire at the Elder Fraud Resource Center with a purse clutched to her chest like armor. "I don't know why I'm here," Joyce said. "My son says I'm being dramatic, that I'm confused." Claire didn't speak right away. She just handed Joyce a cup of lukewarm tea and nodded. "You're here," she said. "That's what matters." Ems. Joyce unfolded a handful of documents, trust amendments, wire transfers, property titles. Her handwriting was tight, anxious. At the top of one sheet, someone had written, "Do not call without my permission," in block letters. My son put that on my phone list, Joyce whispered. I can't even call my sister without him checking the log. Claire felt something inside her shift. Something old. Something familiar. She leaned in. Has anyone ever told you that you're not crazy? Joyce blinked. No. Well, Claire said. Let me be the first. That night, Claire came home late. Margaret was in the den, mending a button on the inside pocket of her old navy coat. Claire dropped her keys in the bowl by the door and stood there a moment, coat still on. There was a woman today, she said softly. She reminded me of you. Margaret looked up, fingers still on the thread. Someone hurt her? Claire nodded. Her son. Not physically, but deeply. Margaret gestured to the sofa, and Claire sank beside her. I wanted to shake him, Claire admitted. To drive over to his house and scream. Margaret smiled, not unkindly. I've imagined worse. They sat in silence for a while. Then Claire asked, Do you think people like that ever realize what they've done? Margaret didn't answer right away. Then she said, Only if they lose something that matters. Claire glanced over. And what did you lose? Margaret sighed. Time. Voice. Trust in myself. She paused, then added, But I also gained something better. I gained you. Back. The next morning, Margaret called her lawyer. Not Alicia this time, but an old friend of Harold's from their church days, someone who still drew up papers by hand and signed letters with fountain ink. They met over coffee at the town diner. I want to draft a deed transfer, Margaret said. Full ownership. To Claire. The lawyer blinked. The house? Margaret nodded. I thought it was already in the trust. It is, she said. But I want her name alone. No joint signature, no stipulations. Just hers. The lawyer leaned back. May I ask why now? Margaret smiled gently. Because I want her to live without wondering if it'll be taken away. I want her to build without asking permission. He pulled out his notepad. Then let's make it official. End of 2. Claire didn't find out until the papers arrived by mail a week later. She opened the envelope while Margaret was outside, trimming back the last of the hydrangeas before the frost came. She came in, papers in hand. Is this real? Margaret looked up. It is. Claire sat down hard in the nearest chair. You didn't have to do this. No, Margaret said. But I wanted to. Claire's eyes brimmed. This house, this porch, it's always been yours. Margaret stepped closer, and now it's yours too. Not because you earned it, not because you had to fix anything, but because I'm choosing freely. Claire folded the papers to her chest and whispered, Thank you. Margaret touched her daughter's cheek. You saved me, you know, when you believed me. That moment changed everything. That night, the wind picked up outside. They made grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup. Nothing fancy. But as they ate, Margaret felt a strange calmness she hadn't known in years, like every corner of the house had been dusted and aired out, even the emotional ones. She thought of Harold, of the way he always left tools in the wrong drawer, of how he never quite finished a project but always started them with hope. She thought of the garage, of ledger lines, of soft tears and hard truths. And then she thought of Claire now walking forward in her own name. It didn't erase what had happened, but it made what came next feel possible. As Margaret lay in bed that night, a candle flickering on the windowsill, she whispered one line, not a prayer, not a memory, just truth. She'll never have to ask if she belongs again, because now everything was finally settled. There's a saying I heard once scrawled on a little calendar page at the back of a general store in Boone, North Carolina. No winter lasts forever. No spring skips its turn. Oh? I didn't understand it then. Back when the air in my life felt frozen in place, when the people I loved had either left, forgotten, or worse, smiled at me while slowly pulling the rug out from under my feet. But now, I do. Spring doesn't announce itself with fanfare. It comes quietly, in the way the soil softens beneath your shoes, in the way the birds return not all at once, but one morning at a time, and in the way your breath stops catching in your throat when you speak your truth out loud. It had been a long winter in my life, but it passed. This morning, I walked the perimeter of the garden alone. Claire was at work, real work, helping women like Joyce file restraining notices, draft guardianship papers, and rewrite the ending of their own stories. I passed the tree Harold had planted the year we bought this house. It had survived hurricanes, termites, and 2 generations of stubborn pruning. And now, in its weathered old age, it stood blooming not brilliantly, but steadily. Kind of like me. At one point, I thought survival meant shrinking. That quietness was a virtue. That being low maintenance made you easier to love. But the truth? Silence can be noble, until it becomes a shroud. And love that only works when you're convenient, well, that's not love at all. Sometimes people ask me if I regret not pressing charges against Nathan, if I regret not finishing the fight. But here's what I've come to understand. Some battles are won the moment you stop letting someone define your worth. Some justice doesn't come from a courtroom. It comes from waking up, making tea, and remembering your own name without flinching. Besides, when I see Claire standing in rooms that once would have crushed her, when I get letters from women who now say, "Because of your story, I spoke up too," when I walk through this home and no longer feel like a guest, that feels like victory enough. People like to think wisdom comes in grand moments. But really, it shows up in small things, like knowing when to say no, like staying when it's hard and leaving when it's harder, like forgiving not because they deserve it, but because you deserve peace. Some nights, I still light a candle on the windowsill, not in grief, but in quiet thanks. For the man who taught me what integrity looked like, for the daughter who reminded me what courage sounds like, and for the girl I once was the one who stayed too quiet too long, but still found her way back to herself. So if you're sitting in your own long winter right now, if the people you loved forgot how to love you back, if you've been made small, silenced, or set aside, hear me. Spring always comes. Sometimes late, sometimes tender, but always, always in time. And when it does, you won't be the same. You'll be wiser. You'll be braver. And maybe, just maybe, you'll be the warmth someone else is waiting for. If Margaret's story touched your heart, leave a comment and tell us. Have you ever walked through a long winter and found your spring? We'd love to hear your story. It just might be the light someone else needs. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with someone who needs this reminder. No winter lasts forever, and no spring skips its turn.